December was quite a wild month. I can't believe I read as many books as I did. Again, I wasn't striving for a number, and you will not believe what books I finished. Hello everyone, welcome back to my channel. So today we're going to be going over all the books that I read in December. I cannot believe how many I actually read because I was not striving for any amount of number of books that I read or trying to push myself. I was just mood reading and just letting it kind of flow, and with it being Christmas and us traveling, I was actually pretty shocked at how many books I did get through. But if you stick around to the end of the video, you will see my 2023 statistics of how many books did I read, how many pages did I read, what was my average rating, things like that. So without further ado, let's get into it, but make sure you check that description box and you follow me on Goodreads and Instagram if you want to. Check out my Pango Books account, and then also become a Patreon member because it is January and we are going to be starting up our book club pick this month, which is Binding 13 by Chloe Walsh. And then also we're going to be having some Patreon exclusive sprints going on, a whole lot of content that you do not want to miss out for. So I hope that you join me over there on Patreon as well. All right, so let's get into the books that I read in December. So starting off December, we had my reread of A Discovery of Witches by Deborah Harkness. I did give this 3 stars. I think that I rated it a little bit higher the first time that I had read it, but going back and reading it now a couple years later, I have found that I just don't like Matthew. I feel like his character doesn't seem like a real person. He seems like a robot kind of thing, but he just doesn't have any depth to him. He doesn't have any context or anything. He's just there. And the way that his character is, it seems like he's very like monotoned or just like doesn't have any emotions kind of thing. I just didn't feel his character. And then Diana, for the age that she is, I feel like she is very childish, and I just don't feel like that her age reflects how she acts, which there's nothing wrong with that because a lot of us are kids at heart and we like to just be playful and stuff. But the way that she was portrayed in this, it seemed really off, and it took me out of the story. However, I did like the historical aspect of this book, where we talk about history, we talk about things that happened in real life that are connected to this book, and you have different supernatural characters where you have demons and vampires, witches, you name it, it's in here, and they're all wanting to get at Diana. So of course Matthew's like, I need to protect her, but I need to stay away from her. And I have heard that this is referenced very much like adult version of Twilight. I couldn't agree more with that statement. I don't remember which booktuber it was. I think it might have been Becca. Becca in the books. I feel like that she definitely referenced it very, very well. And I'm really happy I did my reread because I do want to continue on with this series, because the way that this book ended has me very intrigued on what we're going to do next. The next book in December that I had read was a letdown, and that is Do Your Worst by Rosie Danan. This book follows our female main character who is a curse breaker, I believe, and like it comes from her female lineage. Her grandma was a curse breaker, her mom was a curse breaker, so now she is trying to carry on the family legacy, and she wants to make a name for herself. So she ends up getting a job in Scotland to go to this castle to break this curse, because this big type of property management is wanting to take it over to make it a tourist attraction. So she arrives in Scotland, and she, of course, has some attraction to this guy that she meets at the bar. But then the next morning, whenever she goes to the castle, she finds the guy that she was attracted to trying to ruin her name and pull her through the mud. And he is an archaeologist where he wants to make a name for himself. He was betrayed by some people that were very close to him, and his father is some big archaeologist that everybody, talks about. So he's trying to make a name for himself and be like, no, I'm just as good. And their banter, it's kind of like supposed to be like a hate to love type of relationship. I just didn't feel the hate. I felt like it was more teenage like, where it's like, oh, you know, I'm going to pick on you because I like you kind of thing, not an actual hate. So I didn't feel that aspect of it. The story was all over the place. I just couldn't connect to a lot of it. It was very slow going. I was so disappointed. I gave this book 2 stars. I was so excited for it. I had pre-ordered it. I had even gotten the Illumicrate edition of it. And now I'm just disappointed with it. The next book that I read is another disappointment, and that is God Killer by Hannah Kaner. Now, I do not own this copy anymore. I ended up selling it. I had the Illumicrate edition, and I wanted to buy the Illumicrate edition of Sunbringer as well. But I'm very happy I didn't, because I DNF'd this book. I DNF'd it in probably chapter 11 or 12. I can't really remember where I was at, but I think I was about 100 pages in, if not 150. I made it quite a bit into the book. I just couldn't connect to the characters. You're following our female main character who experiences something whenever she is a child, and it is very traumatic for her. So now she is set out to kill all of these gods, and just the way that her character's written, the dialogue, the story, I couldn't get into it, you guys. It was so slow moving and didn't hold my interest at all. I didn't care about the female main character. It was tragic for what she went through when she was a child, but moving forward in the present, I just couldn't connect to her. I didn't understand why she wanted to kill all these gods, which I'm sure may have been explained later on in the book. I just, got to the point where I was like, I don't want to read this anymore, and I'm not going to make myself push through it. The next book that I ended up reading was Deadlands by Stacey Marie Brown. This is the 3rd book in the Savage Lands series, and I am currently reading it for the Alpha Ho Book Club that Becca hosts. And this is book 3. We are going to be going on to book 4 in January, and I am so happy that I have read this. These books, I can't even tell you what this book is about, but this book this series is about a girl who was orphaned as a child, and she was taken in by the king or whatever he is whenever the Fae lands or the Veil or whatever had fell, and it's in like a Budapest type dystopian world where you have the human lands and the Fae lands. And our girl was born whenever the Veil fell between the Fae lands and the human lands. So now we're like in this dystopian type world, and she was taken in by, like I said, the king or whoever it is that governs the human lands. So she was raised alongside the prince, who becomes her best friend, and she's in love with him, of course. And she likes to rob trains, just for kicks, I guess. And she gets caught, and she gets put into a Fae prison, which is not kind. It is brutal, and she goes through a lot of things that could be triggering. So make sure you check trigger warnings. But she ends up meeting the elusive and legend Warwick Farkas, and our story goes kind of from there. Now book 3, left on a cliffhanger. I feel like the romance is starting to be there. I feel like the story is progressing. The writing isn't that great, you guys, but the stories are so well worth it. Like, you just fly through them. You can't stop reading them, even though they could be done better. The only thing I don't like is everything is too convenient. Like, our girl gets into something and boom, she's out of it. Like, it always seems to be too convenient for her, and I don't like that. I would like a little bit of resistance. I would like a little bit of, oh, we can't get her out, or we can't do this, or something like that, or something goes wrong during that. But other than that, you guys, it's quite an addictive read. Gave it 3 stars. Can't wait to move on to book 4. And if you are thinking about picking up the Savage Lands, if you do like fantasy romance, I do suggest picking this up. And the next book that I read in December is a new to me author, a complete cover by, and it blew my mind. And that is Blackbird of the Gallows by Meg Castle. I Loved this book. It is YA gothic fantasy paranormal romance. That's a lot of genres, right? This is so good. It has the Harbingers of Death in here, which I've never really read a whole lot of books that deal with that. And our girl is like seeing things she is not supposed to be seeing. Our guy that moved in next door is all about like some mysterious, broody male character. It was so good, you guys. If you like gothic vibes, if you want a new kind of creative story, I would definitely suggest picking this up because, like I said, it deals with Harbingers of Death. It deals with a whole unique storyline and unique supernatural creatures. And I found out that there is a second book, and I think it's called like The Beekeeper, Keeper of the Bees, I think is what it's called. I can't wait to get to that. But then also, I saw that there is another book in the series, which I guess is a spinoff, and it's called The Reaper of Souls. You guys, I'm like, there are more books in this world. I'm all in. I do think The Keeper of Bees continues this story, I think. But The Reaper of Souls, I think, deals with different characters that you meet in this series. And then the next book that I read was a shocker to me. I couldn't even believe that I had decided to read it or that I gravitated towards it. And that is My Best Friend's Exorcism by Grady Hendrix. Now, I don't really like horror. You guys know that. But this is like 1980s horror. This is like, Halloween, Stranger Things, things that are not super scary but have the horror elements. And so you're following two girls who are best friends, and one best friend ends up starting to act different. Things happen. So the other friend is fully convinced that she needs an exorcism. We are following her along the way. This deals with teenagers who are in high school, that deal with bullying, that deal with a whole lot of things. It is set in the 80s, so just please know going in that there are going to be phrases and things that are described that maybe nowadays aren't, good to say, but in the 80s, that's just how they were. So just make sure, going in that it is going to be a cultural difference than what we know now to what it was in the 80s. But I enjoyed it. It was okay. I gave it a 3-star. It wasn't scary at all, but it did give me that 1980s horror feel where, I was like watching a Stranger Things episode or something like that. It was okay. I don't think I like Grady Hendrix's writing. I don't think that I really was so invested in the story. So I don't know if I'm going to be reading any more by Grady Hendrix, to be honest with you, but I think this is definitely well worth it. If you like 1980s horror, if you like following two characters that are in their teenage years and you want to get that nostalgia vibe, definitely pick this book up. The next two books I am going to be talking about I'm going to do it at the same time because it was a reread for me, and that is Haunting and Hunting Adeline. So, by H.D. Carlton. Of course, I gave these books 5 stars. I rated them 5 stars the first time I read them. I met H.D. Carlton after reading these books, got my books signed and personalized because I absolutely love them. They are dark romance. Please check trigger warnings because it deals with a lot of things like dubious consent. It deals with sexual assault. It deals with stalking. It deals with kidnapping. It deals with a lot of heavy-hitting topics. So make sure that you check trigger warnings before you get into them because they are extremely dark. They are gruesome in parts, so if you don't really like reading about that kind of stuff, I highly suggest not picking this series up. But just kind of a brief synopsis, you are following Adeline, who is a book writer, and she moves into her grandma's estate after her grandma passes away, and she is renovating it. And come to find out, she is being stalked by somebody that she knows nothing about. She doesn't know who he is. And things happen where she tells the police, but her reports just come up mysteriously missing. Her stalker reveals himself. He basically forces her to do things sexually, but yet she kind of wants to do it, but she does say no, so there is dubious consent in here. The second book deals with sexual assault. It's extremely bad. It also deals with a lot of heavy-hitting topics, worse than the first book. But you are following them as they are trying to figure out what is happening, who is hunting them. Zaid, who is the male love interest, he is very dark and very morally gray. He does do something good, and I'm not even going to say what it is, that kind of offsets all of the bad things he does, but he's very bad nonetheless, and he's everything that I would need in a dark romance character. So I ended up picking these up again. I wanted to do my reread, and I am not sad that I did, because H.D. Carlton just announced, I don't know, a couple weeks ago maybe, that she is making another book in this world, and it is called Where's Molly? And if you've ever read these books, you would know who Molly is, and I cannot wait to read that. But I'm also going to be reading Satan's Affair, I believe, because it deals with Sibby, and Sibby was a character in here that I absolutely love. Sibby is crazy. She's insane. She has a lot of things psychologically wrong with her, but I loved her character, so I can't wait to read about Sibby in that. So like I said, anything that H.D. Carlton comes out with, make sure you check trigger warnings, because they are all extremely dark. And then the next book that I ended up reading is Blood Union Part 2 by Vila Roth. I finally finished up book 6. And again, it did not disappoint. I'm not going to go into a whole lot of this, because if you have been here, you have heard me rave and rave and rave about this series, and it is book 6, so there's not a whole lot I can tell you. But if you like political fantasies, if you like a very dense writing style where it is super slow moving, and you like a proper writing style, and you like fantasy romance, I highly suggest picking these up. I love them. However, they're not for everybody. I know that, because you have to power through a lot of the slow points, and there are quite a bit of slow points, but the payoff is worth it. The story is worth it. Where we started out to where we are now is entirely different. And I am so excited, because the revelations that happened at the end of book 6 has me desperate to get to book 7, which I am going to be starting in January. And it is the last published book currently, but I think the 8th and final book comes out around May. So I'm pretty excited for that. I don't have a whole lot of time to wait for that. So anyway, I ended up reading this, gave it 4 stars. Loved it. I highly suggest you guys picking up the Blood Gray series, seeing if you like it, because you may not think you like a dense political fantasy, but then again you start reading it and you're like, oh, I do like dense political fantasies, because that's exactly what happened to me. And then the last book that I ended up reading in December, I actually just ended up finishing up yesterday, and that is Say You Swear by Megan Brandy. Now, this was like I think a TikTok sensation earlier this year that everybody was talking about, and this is our December pick for my in-person book club that me and my friends are going to be meeting once a month for, and they wanted to read this. So I'm not going to give you a whole lot of my thoughts, because I want to leave that for them. And I think the day that this video comes out is the day that we're meeting to talk about it. So maybe I'll give you my thoughts on it. So basically, you are following our female main character. What is her name? Ariana. And she and her twin brother Mason grew up with these other guys, with this other girl, and their parents are all best friends. So they grew up together as best friends, and they all equally own this beach house that their parents had bought and gifted to them. So they all own it. So it's not just one person. And so they go there for the summer. She is in love with Chase, who is one of her brother's best friends, and she has been for years. And while they're at the beach house, she ends up meeting a guy named Noah Riley, and he is also going to be going to Avix College, where they're all going to be going, and he is like the captain of the football team, the star quarterback, and so she ends up being drawn to him, like where he's easy to talk to, and she doesn't really kind of understand why, and things happen. at the beach house between her and somebody. I can't even tell you who it is. And it just kind of goes from there. This book ripped my heart out. It had some hard-hitting topics in here, so please check trigger warnings because I did not know them going into it. I was sobbing at the end of this book. I cannot believe how much emotion it sucked out of me. I did give this 3 stars because I wasn't fully invested in the story up until the very end, but it was intriguing enough for me to continue on. But man, that ending had my heart ripped out. I was crying probably for the last 20% of the book. I was crying. So I highly suggest picking this up if you like contemporary romances, especially sports romances that deal with college athletes. Pick this up because it's a twist, a turn, a ride. I couldn't believe kind of what happened. I couldn't believe the turn of events. I couldn't even believe the ending. It was just a wild ride. So I highly suggest picking that up. So those are all the books that I read in December. Definitely leave me a comment below. Let me know which books you enjoyed hearing about. Tell me any books that maybe you have read that you agree with me or don't agree with me. Let me know your thoughts below. And I am going to be going over my statistics for the year. Okay, so I have my Goodreads pulled up, and this is my year in books from my reading goal, and it's for 2023. So let's just kind of see my statistics here. It says that I have read 52,370 pages this year. I have read 123 books. It says that my shortest book that I read was The Dare by Harley LaRue, and the longest book that I read is the Iliad and the Odyssey, which is 1,556 pages. However, that is wrong because I did not finish that, so I don't know why Goodreads put that on there, but we'll just go with it since I don't know why it did that. But it said that the average book length in 2023 was 425 pages. That was kind of like the average book that I read, I guess. And my average rating for 2023 was 3.4 stars. And I feel like that's just kind of mediocre. It's kind of like in the middle. It doesn't mean that I had a lot of bad books, but it doesn't mean that I had a lot of outstanding books. But my average rating was 3.4, which is kind of shocking because I do feel like this year I've had quite a lot of 4- and 5-star books, but I guess maybe I really haven't. Maybe I've had a lot of DNFs and a lot of 2 stars. I'm not entirely sure. So it just kind of goes through that, and there's really not any other statistics. My last review of the year, though, was Blood Union Part 2 by Vila Roth. And it says that I put on there that 50 books was my challenge, and I exceeded that. I did a 246% increase from that with the 123 books that I read, which I really hope that it didn't count the DNFs that I had, which I think I only had 4 DNFs this year, but I hope it didn't count those. But with it showing the longest book being the Iliad and the Odyssey, I think it did count that. So let me know below, you guys, how I can avoid that in 2024, because if I DNF a book, I don't want it to, show up on there as an actual book that I read. So let me know your thoughts below on how I can not do that. But all in all, I feel like 2023, I had some pretty decent reading experiences. I did not expect to read 123 books, and I think the reason why I read so much, especially from mid-year to the end, I was doing more of a mood read of what books I would like to read, no matter what season it was, because just because it's a dark romance or a fall type book, I still enjoy it in the spring. I'm not one of those mood readers that reads due to the season. But I feel like I read a lot more than I would have if I kept myself at a structure where I have to read specific books. And we're just going to see how that trends into 2024. So I don't know what I am going to set my 2024 goal as. I probably will put it at 100 books, and I'm not even going to hold myself to that. I mean, if I reach the 100 books, I do. If I don't, I don't. It's not going to be the end of the world, and I'm not going to be devastated if I don't reach that. But I think just a flat 100 would be pretty consistent over the past couple of years of what I have read. So leave me some thoughts below on how I can avoid my DNFs showing up as actual books that I read, and let me know your thoughts on my statistics or any of the books that I read in December, and also give me some tips and tricks for 2024. Are there any books that you desperately want me to get to? Also, if you are a Patreon, you do get to pick a book, and I put it into a jar, and I pick a book each month to read that you guys request. So if you want a book to be read desperately, join my Patreon and let's, kind of talk books and everything there. But I'm going to go ahead and go. I hope that you all have a great start to your 2024 year, and I will talk to you next time. Bye!